My brother texted, "No room for you on this year's Christmas trip." I replied, "Okay." It was the same story every year. An hour later, my parents posted a perfect family photo from their ski lodge. Even the dog was there. But when they discovered the vacation I took without them, my phone exploded. I'm 28 years old, and this has been my life for as long as I can remember. When I was 16, they went to Hawaii without me because the rental house only had 3 bedrooms. When I graduated college, they took a cruise to celebrate my brother's engagement instead. Last year, it was a vineyard tour in Napa. Couples only, they said. Every single time I'd get the text, some version of "no room" or "next time" or "you understand." And every single time I'd reply, "Okay." But this year was different. 3 months before Christmas, I closed the biggest deal of my career. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I just sold a $12 million property. My commission, $35,000, the biggest check I'd ever seen. My family didn't know. I learned years ago not to tell them when good things happened because my mom would immediately need help with bills or my brother would have some investment opportunity. So when that text from my brother came through on December 10th, I was sitting in my apartment staring at my bank account. For the first time in my life, I had options. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there for about 20 minutes thinking about every missed vacation, every family photo I wasn't in, every time I convinced myself it was okay. Then I opened my laptop and searched "luxury Christmas vacation." I found it within 10 minutes. The Aurora Resort in the Maldives, overwater villas, private butler service, infinity pools overlooking turquoise water. The week-long package was $8,000. I booked it without hesitation. First-class flights, upgraded villa, spa package, the works. I texted my brother back 2 hours later. Just one word, "Okay." My parents posted their ski lodge photo the next day. They were all there, grinning in matching red sweaters in front of a massive stone fireplace. My dad, my mom, my brother Jason, his wife Michelle, even their golden retriever Bailey had made the cut. The caption read, "Our perfect pack, blessed beyond measure." I liked the photo, didn't comment, and just went back to planning my own trip. Christmas morning, I woke up at 6:00 a.m., Maldives time. The sun was already climbing over the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of pink and gold. I ordered champagne and fresh fruit to my villa deck. At 9:00 a.m., their time, right when I knew they'd all be opening presents, I posted a single photo. Me in a white linen shirt, champagne flute in hand, endless blue water behind me. My caption was simple. "Finally found my perfect family vacation. Merry Christmas to me." I put my phone on silent and went snorkeling. When I checked it 3 hours later, I had 47 notifications. My mom had called 6 times. My dad left a voicemail that just said, "Call me immediately." Jason texted, "Where the hell are you?" Michelle, my sister-in-law, sent a long message. "Chase, this is really immature. Your mother is crying. We saved you a stocking. This is how you repay them, by rubbing some expensive vacation in their faces during family time." I didn't respond to any of them. I went to dinner instead. Fresh lobster, more champagne. That evening, my coworker Sarah commented on my post. Sarah and I had been friends for 2 years, and she was one of the few people who knew the real story about my family. Her comment said, "That's the Aurora Resort, right? We're there hosting the Southeast Asia Real Estate Summit. Congrats on being selected as a keynote speaker. So well deserved." I smiled, because that was the part I hadn't told my family. Yes, I'd booked a luxury villa in the Maldives, but I'd booked it specifically during the week of the real estate conference because I'd been invited to speak about my record-breaking year. The conference was paying for my flights and accommodation. On the last night of the conference, one of the attendees, a lawyer from Atlanta, recognized my last name. He asked if I was related to the Hendersons in Colorado. I said yes, confused. He got quiet. Then he told me he'd been handling a private estate matter for a family matching that description. A ski lodge trip that had been planned not for Christmas, but to gather everyone together to sign documents. My parents had updated their will 2 weeks before, and I hadn't been included. His name was David Frey. We were standing near the resort bar, and the music was playing something soft and forgettable. And I remember thinking that this was a weird place to find out you'd been erased from your own family. He didn't mean to tell me. You could see it on his face the second he realized what he'd said. He started backtracking immediately, talking about confidentiality and how he shouldn't have mentioned anything. But I just looked at him and said, "It's fine. I appreciate you telling me." He handed me his card anyway, said if I had questions later I could reach out. I shook his hand, thanked him, and walked back across the resort toward my villa. The path was lined with those little solar lights they put in the sand, and the ocean was making that constant low sound it makes at night. I got to my villa, opened the door, walked straight through to the deck, and sat down in one of those expensive teak chairs that probably cost more than my first car. I just stared at the water. It was dark enough that I couldn't see much, just the white foam where the waves broke. I ordered a beer from the Villa phone. It came in like 10 minutes. Cold bottle on a wooden tray with a little bowl of cashews I didn't ask for. I set it on the table next to me and never touched it. The condensation ran down the glass and pooled on the wood, and I watched it the same way I was watching the ocean, like I was looking at something, but not really seeing it. Around midnight, I went inside. I didn't shower, didn't change. I just lay down on top of the sheets, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. There was a fan up there, one of those slow ones that doesn't actually cool anything, just moves the air around. I counted the rotations for a while, then I stopped counting and just listened to it. The sun came up and I was still lying there in the same position. I never actually slept. The next morning, I packed my stuff, checked out, and got to the airport early. I was polite to everyone, smiled at the woman who checked my bag, said thank you to the flight attendant who offered me a hot towel, ordered a coffee I didn't drink during the layover in Dubai. On the second flight, the long one back to the States, I opened my phone for the first time since the night before. I'd muted the family group chat 3 years ago, but it was still there in my messages. I opened it, scrolled back. There were hundreds of messages, literally hundreds. Trip planning, inside jokes, photos of things I wasn't part of. Someone would send a meme and 3 people would react with laughing emojis, and someone else would reference something that happened on a trip I didn't go on. It was like reading a conversation in a language I was supposed to know but didn't. Then I found the thread from last April. It started with my dad asking, "Should we invite Chase to the lake house?" And I stopped scrolling. Jason replied maybe an hour later. You know how he gets. Better not. My mother responded with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No follow-up. No one asked what "how he gets" meant. My dad just sent back okay, and the conversation moved on to whether they should bring steaks or fish. I put my phone face down on the tray table and didn't touch it again for the rest of the 11-hour flight. I stared at the seat in front of me, watched half a movie with no sound. When we landed, I got my bag from the overhead, walked through the terminal, got in my car, and drove home. I pulled into my parking garage, turned off the engine, and sat there in the dark for almost an hour before I finally went upstairs. That week, I couldn't focus on anything. I had 2 client calls I barely remembered after they ended. I went to the gym and left after 15 minutes. On Thursday, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, and I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. When I was in college, my dad added me to the family iCloud account so we could share photos. I'd never used it. Didn't even remember the login, but I tried it that night, and it still worked. I went through the message threads, the backed up texts, the old emails, notes my mom had written to herself, and what I found was worse than distance. It was a constructed story. 2 years of Jason telling my parents things about me that weren't true. There was a text from June 2 years ago where Jason told my mom I'd been drinking too much at a work event and embarrassed myself. I wasn't even at a work event in June 2 years ago. I was closing a deal in Austin and I was alone the entire trip. There was another one from October where he told my dad I'd borrowed $3,000 from a mutual friend named Kevin and never paid him back. I've never borrowed money from Kevin. I barely know Kevin. But the one that really got me was from 14 months ago. Jason sent my mom a long message, like paragraph long, about how I'd told him directly over lunch that I didn't consider myself part of the family anymore, and that I was only staying in touch out of obligation. The message had so much detail. What restaurant we were at, what I ordered, how I looked when I said it. None of it happened. I didn't have lunch with Jason 14 months ago. I didn't have lunch with Jason at any point that year, and my parents believed him. Every single time. There were responses from both of them, sympathetic and worried, asking what they should do, how they should handle me. My mom sent Jason a message saying, maybe we should give him space if that's what he needs. My dad said, I don't want to make things worse by pushing. It was all right there. Jason was feeding them a version of me that didn't exist. And because he was the one who showed up, the one who was physically there in the room with them, they believed him. And I was the one who never showed up, which made sense because they kept not inviting me. I sat with that for a long time, just me and my laptop in my apartment at like 2 o'clock in the morning, reading messages about myself written by people who were supposed to know me. On Saturday, I called my Aunt Linda. She's my mom's older sister, lives about 40 minutes outside of Denver, and she's always been the one person in the extended family who seemed like she actually paid attention. The phone rang 4 times and I almost hung up, but then she picked up. Chase, hey, how are you? Her voice was weird. Not cold, but careful, like she was already braced for something. I'm okay, I said. I wanted to ask you about something. There was a pause. Then she said, Jason called me a few days ago. Of course he did. What did he say? He said you've been going through a tough time, that you're upset about some family planning stuff and that you might reach out to people and say things that aren't exactly accurate. I closed my eyes. Linda, do you remember the last time you saw me? At Thanksgiving 2 years ago? Yeah, Did I seem like I had a drinking problem? Silence. Because apparently Jason's been telling people for the past 2 years that I do, and I'm just trying to figure out if anyone actually believed it, or if everyone just kind of went along with it because it was easier. She exhaled, long and slow. Chase, honestly, I heard versions of that story, and I guess I half believed it. Not because I saw anything, just because, I don't know. Jason said it, and he's around all the time, and you're not, so I just assumed there was something I wasn't seeing. Did I ever seem drunk to you? At any family event you can remember? Another pause. Longer this time. No, honestly, no, and I should have said something. Her voice changed on that last part. Not quite an apology, but close enough that I could hear she meant it. Thanks for telling me, I said. Chase, I'm sorry, I really am. I should have asked you directly instead of just listening to, it's fine, I said, even though it wasn't. I just needed to know. We hung up a minute later. I sat in my kitchen and realized the person I most wanted to hear from, the person who actually knew me and who had been around and who could have corrected the record at any point, just told me they chose not to. 3 days later, my mom showed up. No warning. I heard the knock and opened the door, and there she was, puffy-eyed, holding her purse with both hands like she thought I might slam the door in her face. Can I come in? I stepped aside and she walked past me into the living room. She didn't sit down, just stood there looking around like she'd never been in my apartment before, which was true. She'd never visited. Not once in the 4 years I'd lived there. Your post, she started, and her voice cracked a little. The one from the Maldives. It was really embarrassing, Chase. My book club has been asking me questions. And the ladies at church, they saw the photo and they, Mom, she stopped. I don't care about your book club. Her face did something complicated, half hurt, half defensive. Well, I do. These are my friends, and you made me look like a terrible mother. I didn't make you look like anything. I went on a vacation and posted a photo. That's it. You knew what you were doing. Maybe I did. I didn't say that part out loud. She sat down finally on the edge of the couch and pulled a tissue out of her purse even though she wasn't crying yet. I don't understand why you're so angry. We've always tried to include you, but you're hard to reach, Chase. You never answer when we call. You don't come to things. You don't invite me to things. That's not true. When was the last time you invited me to something and I said no? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the tissue in her hands. I can tell you every trip you've taken without me in the last 10 years, I said. I can tell you the excuses. No room. Couples only. Next time. I've heard all of them. And I said okay every single time because I thought maybe it was just bad timing. But it wasn't bad timing, was it? She didn't answer. I saw the group chat, Mom. The one from April, where Dad asked if I should be invited to the lake house and Jason said no and you gave it a thumbs up. Do you remember that? Her face went pale. Chase, that was taken out of context. What context makes that okay? She started crying for real then, and I felt bad for half a second before I remembered that I'd been left out of family photos for a decade, and she'd never cried about that. Jason was just trying to manage things, she said, voice shaky. He said you'd been stressed, that you didn't like big family gatherings, that it was easier if we gave you space. And you believed him. He's there, Chase. He's always there. He calls me 3 times a week. He brings the kids over. She stopped herself, but I knew where that sentence was going. Say it. You're just never around, because you don't ask me to be. She wiped her eyes, and I could see her trying to regroup, trying to find some version of this conversation where she wasn't the one in the wrong. What about the drinking? She said quietly. Jason said. Jason lied. He wouldn't. He did, and I can prove it. I grabbed my laptop off the kitchen counter, opened it, pulled up the screenshots I'd already saved. I turned it around and showed her the messages, the dates, the stories that didn't line up with reality. Read them. She looked at the screen. Her hands were shaking a little. She read for maybe 2 minutes, scrolling slowly, and then she stopped and closed the laptop. I need to talk to your father, she said. What about the will? Her whole body went stiff. She looked at me like I'd just said something obscene. How do you... David Frey, estate attorney. He told me at the resort. You updated it 2 weeks before Christmas, and I'm not in it. She stood up fast, almost knocking her purse off the couch. He had no right discussing private family matters with you. So it's true. It's none of your business until you die and I find out I've been erased? Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. She stared at me, and I could see her trying to figure out what to say, how to spin this into something that didn't make her look like exactly what she was. We were going to talk to you about it, she said finally. When? No answer. Were you going to tell me before you died or just let me find out at the lawyer's office after? This is exactly why Jason said we shouldn't. She stopped herself mid-sentence, but it was too late. I heard it. Jason said you shouldn't tell me. She grabbed her purse. I need to go. Mom, I can't do this right now, Chase. I can't. She left. I handed her a bottle of water on her way out because she looked like she might pass out on my stairs, and she took it without saying thank you. The door closed, and I stood there in the middle of my apartment staring at the space where she'd been. That night, Jason called. It was late, almost 11 o'clock p.m., and I knew before I answered that he'd already talked to Mom. Hey man, he said, and his voice was warm, easy, like we were buddies catching up. How's it going? Fine. Good, good. Hey, I was thinking about that camping trip we took when you were like 12. Remember that? Up in Rocky Mountain National Park? Dad let us stay up late and we saw that meteor shower. I remembered. I also remembered that Jason spent most of that trip complaining that he had to share a tent with me. Yeah, I said. Man, I miss that. I miss when things were simple, you know? Just the four of us. No drama, no complications. He kept going. Talked about the trip for another 3 minutes. How Dad burned the hot dogs. How Mom made us wear matching hats she'd bought at a gas station. It was a good memory. He was using it like a weapon. Anyway, he said, and I could hear the shift in his voice, the transition into what he'd actually called to say. Mom told me you guys talked. And listen, I think this whole will thing is getting blown way out of proportion. Is it? Yeah, man. I mean, pulling the family into legal territory over something that hasn't even taken effect yet? That's exactly the kind of behavior that made everyone worry about you in the first place. There it was. What behavior, Jason? You know, the way you can get sometimes. Say it plainly. Silence. I waited. He didn't. I saw the messages, I said. The ones you sent Mom and Dad. About the drinking. About me borrowing money from Kevin. About the lunch where I supposedly told you I didn't feel like part of the family anymore. More silence. This one lasted about 5 seconds, and I could practically hear him recalibrating on the other end of the line. You went through the iCloud account, he said finally. Yeah, that's a violation of privacy, Chase. Jesus, I can't believe you'd do that. Do you know how that's going to make Mom and Dad feel? Going through their private messages like some kind of, were the stories true? What? The drinking, the money, the lunch? Did any of that happen? He exhaled, long and frustrated, like I was the one being unreasonable. You're twisting things. You're reading those messages in the worst possible light and, yes or no, Jason, I can't believe you're doing this to them. At their age, they don't need this kind of stress. Answer the question. I'm done, he said. I'm not doing this. You want to burn everything down over some old text messages, fine. But don't expect me to stand here and let you drag Mom and Dad through it. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the screen, and I realized he'd run that whole conversation like a script. The nostalgia opener, the concern, the pivot to me being the problem. He'd done it before, probably 100 times. And it had always worked because I'd never pushed back hard enough to make him actually answer anything. 2 days later, my dad called. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me. Hey, son. His voice was quiet, tired. He didn't sound angry, which made it worse somehow. Hey, Dad, your mother told me about your conversation, and I wanted to call because I think there are some things we need to talk about. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about what Jason told us over the years, about you, and I realize now that a lot of what I thought I knew was coming from him and not from you directly. I didn't say anything, just waited. That's not fair to you, he said, and I'm sorry. It was the most direct thing he'd said to me in years. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. I want to understand what happened, really understand. Can you send me those screenshots your mother mentioned? I sent them that night, all of them. The drinking story, the borrowed money, the fake lunch, the group chat messages, everything. I didn't add any commentary, just sent the images in one long thread and waited. 6 days passed. Nothing. On the 7th day, he called me back, and I knew immediately that something had changed. His voice was different, flatter, more careful. I got the messages, he said. And I talked to Jason. Of course he did. He has an explanation for those messages, and I think maybe you're reading them in the worst possible light. What's the explanation? My dad paused. He said he was trying to protect us, that you were going through something and he didn't want us to worry, so he managed it the best way he knew how. That doesn't explain why he lied. He didn't lie, Chase. He interpreted situations differently than you did. That's not the same thing. Dad, he said I borrowed money from Kevin. I've never borrowed money from Kevin. Maybe he misunderstood something. He said we had lunch, and I told him I didn't feel like part of the family. That lunch never happened. Chase. His voice got firmer. Jason is there. He's always been there. He calls us, he visits, he brings the kids over every week. You have to understand what that means to us. I understand exactly what it means. We hung up a few minutes later. He didn't yell, didn't get defensive. He just made it clear in the quietest way possible. That proximity mattered more than truth. The next week I closed a deal. Not a huge one, just a small commercial property. But it took up 2 full days and I was grateful for the distraction. I had dinner by myself on Friday night at this Italian place I like, sat at the bar, had 2 drinks, went home fine. Normal. The kind of normal that would have disproven every single thing Jason ever said about me if anyone had bothered to look. On Saturday, I drove past the street where my college friend Pete lives. Pete's known both me and Jason for 15 years. He was at Jason's wedding. He's texted me on my birthday for the past 8 years, and I realized I hadn't heard from him since the Maldives post. I checked Instagram. He'd unfollowed me. That one actually hurt. Not the will, not the trips. Pete. I called him. He picked up on the 3rd ring, and I could immediately tell he'd been briefed. Hey, man, he said, and it sounded like he was forcing it. Hey, you doing okay? Yeah, I'm good. You? I'm fine. I just noticed you unfollowed me and wanted to make sure everything was cool. Silence. Then, look, I don't want to get in the middle of it. In the middle of what? Whatever's going on with you and Jason. He called me last week, said you guys are going through a stressful time, and honestly, man, I just can't deal with family drama right now. I've got my own stuff. Did he tell you what the stressful time was about? He said something about you threatening legal action over inheritance stuff. And look, whatever you think you found in those messages, there's probably context you don't have. Pete, have you ever seen me drunk? What? Have you ever in 15 years seen me drunk? Or borrow money from someone and not pay it back? Or do any of the stuff Jason's apparently been telling people I do? He went quiet. I could hear him breathing. No, he said finally. Honestly? No. Then why are you believing him? Because Jason and Michelle are going through a lot right now, and I don't want to make it worse. I'm sorry, man. I just can't do this. Okay, I hung up. Didn't call him again. The weird thing about my dad is that he surprises you sometimes. A week later, he called me on a Wednesday morning. I was getting coffee and I almost sent it to voicemail, but I picked up. Chase, it's Dad. Hey, I went back through some old emails, the family trip planning threads from the last few years. I stopped walking, just stood there on the sidewalk holding my coffee. And I've been sitting with this, really sitting with it. And I realized that what I allowed to happen, regardless of what I was told, was wrong. He said it plainly. No qualifiers, no excuses. You deserve to be included. You deserve to be asked. And I'm sorry that didn't happen. I didn't know what to say. I think I just said okay, or maybe thanks. We talked for a few more minutes, nothing heavy, and then we hung up. And I was left with this complicated feeling. Not forgiveness, not relief, just the exhausting realization that I'd been right about something I really wished I'd been wrong about. He told me he was going to talk to Jason. He did. I don't know exactly what was said, but whatever happened in that conversation fractured something, because Jason called my mom immediately after. He spent 2 hours on the phone with her, and by the end of it, he'd reframed the entire situation as me weaponizing a legal threat to extract inheritance money. My mom called me that same night. She sounded less certain than before, but still halfway convinced. Chase, did you talk to an attorney? Yeah, she exhaled like that confirmed something. Having information about your legal options isn't the same as planning to sue your own family, I said. I don't know what to believe anymore. I know. That's been the problem for a long time. She didn't argue. We hung up and I sat there thinking about how exhausting it was to be right. The family meeting happened on a Sunday. My dad set it up. Everyone was supposed to come to the house and talk things through like adults, which felt optimistic, but I said yes anyway. I drove there alone. Jason and Michelle pulled up right after me. Michelle got out of the car with her arms already folded across her chest, and I knew this was going to be bad. We went inside, sat in the living room. My dad tried to run it like he'd rehearsed, but you could tell he'd forgotten half of what he wanted to say. My mom cried at the table before anyone even started talking. Bailey, the dog, sat next to me and put his head on my knee, which was the only good part of the first 40 minutes. Jason did most of the talking. He kept circling back to the same points. I was making this harder than it needed to be. I was putting everyone in an impossible position. I was taking things out of context. My dad tried to mediate. My mom just cried. About an hour in, Jason said, "You need to think about the position you're putting them in at their age." Michelle, who'd been silent the whole time, said under her breath, "I always knew this would happen eventually." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" She looked at Jason instead of answering. "What does that mean, Michelle?" Jason stood up. "I'm done talking in circles." He walked into the kitchen. My mom followed him. My dad stayed at the table with me and Bailey. Neither of us said anything for a while. The dog kept his head on my knee and I scratched behind his ears, and the house was quiet except for the sound of my mom and Jason talking in low voices in the other room. After a few minutes, my dad said, "I don't know how to fix this." "I don't think you can," I said. He nodded, didn't argue. The week after the meeting, my attorney sent me an update. A revised will was being drafted. I was being reinstated. It should have felt like a resolution, but it didn't. It felt like paperwork. I texted my dad, got the notice from the attorney. He replied, "Good." That was it. One word. Jason didn't contact me. Michelle posted a photo 2 days later of a family dinner. Just her and Jason and their 2 kids at the table. The caption said, "Our little unit." I saw it. Kept scrolling. My birthday was 6 weeks later. I woke up, went to work, came home. Around 4:00 p.m., there was a card in my mailbox. It was from my parents. Inside was a check for $200, the same amount they'd sent every year since I was in college. The card had a picture of a sunset on the front and my mother's handwriting on the inside. Family is forever. There was no mention of anything that happened. No acknowledgement of the Maldives, the will, the meeting. Just $200 and a hallmark phrase. I set the check on my kitchen counter next to the letter from the estate attorney. Looked at both of them for a second. Then I picked up my phone and called my broker to confirm the Thursday walkthrough was still on. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to not miss the next story.